We are live. Kim White always tells me to like wait a few seconds after it says we're live. That way people
Yeah,
actually
it's got to
can
load.
hear us. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's like an awkward long silence for us at the beginning, but hopefully it works out for people watching. But we're back with Jason today, and he's going to be talking about caching, which everybody always hears like, oh, it's just a caching problem. But what does that even mean?
Yeah. So I plan to talk through some caching things. I have our Must Love Dogs demo up on a local site, and I can run through W3 Total Cache, which is my favorite caching plugin for WordPress. And yeah, talk about caching at a high level. There's all kinds of caching. There's different levels. All of the 8 different players involved in getting your website into the browser of your customer, plus the browser itself has its own caching layer. So I talk through some of that. So sometimes it's like, oh, just enable caching. And you're like, what does that really mean? And I guess if people have patience for it, I can also kind of hand wave through some of the advanced caching topics. There's like, if you're building caching for one specific site, there's some clever things you can do that sometimes people ask us to put into the plugin, but it's really so specific to every site and setup that it needs to be just done at the single site level. So,
Yeah, and we
and if
actually
anyone, yeah,
we
go
did
ahead.
not get any pre-submitted questions prior
Yeah.
to the event, which is kind of sad. But at any point in the chat, throw out questions. I can interrupt Jason and we can address those and let us know that you're here.
Yeah. I want to answer those caching questions. Let me look at my notes. So, yeah, there's some. I'm wondering like what's good to look at while we talk. There is a document on our page here, paymerchantspro.com/documentation/advanced/caching. I think if you type in /caching, it'll redirect to that. And this is a good read, and it goes through some things. So I'm not just going to read a page in front of you, but I will talk through some of this stuff. I think something I'll show up on the screen is this, while I'm talking through caching, is this diagram. Let me give credit for this one too. This is off a Medium post by Callum Sampath. His Medium blog is called Codex, Codex. Interesting. And I think, like what you see here on the screen is, like I said, so the browser itself has its own caching layer. Oh, wait, before we get into it, if I'm assuming everyone even knows what caching is, let's give a
I
definition
think
for it.
you're assuming too much.
Yeah, I'm assuming too much. What is caching? So caching, if you think of like a cache of gold, like like I store it away somewhere, like if you know that definition of the English word cache, that's a little bit what it is. You're storing away the content that is frequently accessed on the site. So you take for quicker retrieval. So if you have a website, everyone goes to the homepage. If it takes WordPress runs on PHP is the server-side programming language on your web server. And all that stuff it accesses a database to figure out like, what am I supposed to show this person on the screen? And your page builder, Paid Memberships Pro, every other plugin on your website has to run. And together, all that programming code in PHP mostly figures out like what to display to the website. And that all takes some time. Maybe something that's fun is I could put in like a query monitor plugin. Let me show you something quick. So this is my demo site. And by the way, the demo site runs blazing fast because it's just on a local machine. But one of our favorite plugins is this one, Query Monitor. And if you activate this and then visit any page on the front end or back end, you get this extra little section in your admin bar, which will show you some errors. But it also gives you stats. So it says this loaded in 0.4 seconds. It was 8.8 megabytes of like memory was used to load it. I wonder what the 11 seconds the second one is. That might be like first paint, like it like starts loading in 0.11 seconds and fully loads in 40. And or maybe it's the database time, because this query monitors specific to like database queries. But the website has to make 91 different queries to the database. And again, like this is really technical. I don't know. Hopefully this helps like sink in what's happening. This is how we roll. So
The
there's
good thing
91
is they
queries.
can all
Yeah.
rewatch this. So they don't have
Yeah.
anybody watching it now does not feel like they need to absorb it all right now. They can come back and rewatch.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if like this is legible enough like on the screen, but in Query Monitor, all 91 database queries are listed here. And then on the right side is the time. Like it took 0.04 seconds to load the options out of the WordPress options table. And depending on what you're doing, if you're on the blog page, it's going to run a little slower. It's like 119 queries that take, 0.2 seconds. And again, this is on like blazing fast local server. On the web, all this stuff is going to be a little bit slower. And so all this stuff adds up. The time adds up to access to database, to figure it out, to package the page together and present it to the user. So what the cache does is it takes a snapshot of that web page in various forms. The most common one, the one we'll go into here, is called page caching. So it's literally like the code to generate the page of your website gets cached. And then the next time someone comes to the website, instead of hitting your web server and having the page generated, it just gets the snapshot version of your web page. So that happens at the page generation level. If you set it up, your host is also doing it at the server level. If someone asks for the same file over and over, it kind of stores a cached version of a file. There's a thing called CDN, Content Delivery Networks, which either is automatically set up for you by your host or potentially something you can configure. And so if I'm in Pennsylvania and I load a website in Europe, it's like, oh, I'll load a file for you from like a New York or Pennsylvania server that's closer because it's faster. The DNS, that's the domain name service, right? So the thing that says when you go to paidmembershipspro.com, hit the paidmembershipspro.com server, there's a caching that happens at that level. And then let me go back to my diagram here. There's a caching that happens in the browser. So the browser itself says like, I've downloaded jQuery, which is a JavaScript library. Like I already have it. I don't have to download that again. I already have the big, logo image from your homepage. It's stored on my browser. I don't have to get that from the web server. So stuff is cached in the browser. So that's good to enable. And W3 Total Cache will help you fully utilize the browser cache. Then on your web server here, there's like a local cache, and this is where like the page cache will sit. There's also something called like Varnish or Redis. Like these are tools, Memcache. Like your host uses one or more of those to kind of do some caching as well, and sometimes you can interact with that. What's labeled as global cache here is like there's third-party tools that would count like the CDNs I talked about, like to serve images and some files more quickly. But like I think this diagram is more for like advanced apps, and it's like where you would use third-party tools to cache as well as stuff on the server. And then the database has its own cache, and you can enable like stricter database caching. So anyway, this also like there's caching everywhere. So when people say like enable the cache, it's like, what do you exactly mean? And we'll go through like what the most common one is. Are people strolling in yet? No questions?
No.
Okay.
It's just a Jason Sam show.
Yeah, let's do this. So I think we can, yeah, I think probably what's useful is to go through the W3 Total Cache setup, which has a lot of these different types of caching. Wait a minute. Also, so when we talk about caching, we were talking just about the server and the browser and the internet. Like at the plugin level itself, WordPress itself is caching things. So Paid Memberships Pro is caching things. Anyway, that's just like another level of it, is like that the caching is built into the code as well. Whether you enable it or not, we do our own caching. But anyway, I think we can set up W3 Total Cache on this demo site and walk through it, and that'll walk us through some of the different caching types. And then it'd be pretty cool to do some load testing on that and see what the impact is. And then talk about some of the advanced things that you might do. So let me get into that. This might be a good video of installing W3 Total Cache. So here I have a demo WordPress site, and I'd like to install caching on it. I'm following the instructions at paidmembershipspro.com/caching. We'll take you to this more extended URL. And so what I'm going to do is install the W3 Total Cache plugin. There's a bunch of other plugins, premium and free, that do different kinds of caching. But that's the one that has been around for a while and that we like. And our instructions on this page kind of most closely map to that. So let me do that. I'm going to that plugin is in the repository. So I'm just going to go add new plugin and search for W3 Total Cache. Now, one thing about W3 Total Cache is it's a big plugin with tons and tons of options. I think some of the caching plugins, there's one called Rocket Cache that people like, which I'm pretty sure is, I think it's known for more like you install it, you activate it, and it works. And you're like most sites, it's like it figured it out. And you can, if you need to dig in, to change some things. But W3 Total Cache is a little more hands-on. So let's see what happens here. So I'm going to activate it from this tab. Cool. So yeah, I think this message I'm getting here might be from the Total Cache. So my local web server is running the Nginx web server. There's pretty much two big servers in WordPress, Apache and Nginx. There's another one called Lightspeed and another one that's popular. Shoot, those people. There's some other ones, but those are the main ones. So let me see. It wants me to restart the server. I'm going to hide this message, and I'll come back to think about that. I wonder what W3 Total Cache changed about the config. But I will look here in the sidebar. The W3 Total Cache, when it installs, it creates a performance menu. And then I can go into the dashboard. So I'll decline this because this is a test site for sending info back. And then maybe we should try the setup guide. I haven't used the setup guide, so let's see how it goes. Next. Cool. So this is nice. It's given us like some information about what the page cache is. So it's going to test it. Let's see what happens here. Cool. So, so this is what it's showing here is that it loaded our website in some form. And I think this is pretty similar to what we were getting, like 208 milliseconds here. So that's like 2 seconds to load. It's where I don't know exactly what it's loading. That's faster. Actually, our site was loading a little bit faster. But so in milliseconds, like, hey, with no caching enabled, it's taking 208 milliseconds to load whatever test page Total Cache is using. If it uses what's called basic disk caching, which just means they're going to store a file on your web server that has the snapshot of the HTML that is being served. And so I actually don't know the difference between disk basic and disk enhanced. It's odd. Actually, the disk basic is a little faster on my setup, even though it's recommending this. Like a lower number is better here. And I think again, like these things on a live website, these numbers are going to be much higher. Like on a local website, you may not see the impact. So if you develop your site locally and then load it up to your web host, you're going to want to do this kind of setup and testing on your live site or a staging site that's on the same kind of web host as what you have. These numbers aren't going to be as remarkable for a local website. And then you probably want to avoid these technologies unless you are managing the site yourself or your hosting company told you to do that. Like these require that specific software be installed on your host that you may or may not have. Cool. So I guess I'll do the recommended. Again, we'll take a note. What does W3 total cache? What's the difference between basic and enhanced? We can look that up. But my understanding is it's literally creating a file and then storing it in your WP uploads folder, and then it serves that file instead of generating the page on demand. So then that was the page cache. That's honestly like the most important cache to set up. And not only like an important concept here to understand with caching is there's static and dynamic content. So that you see this is mentioning like dynamic pages. That means like the pages generated, things are different. Static content is like the images, the text that doesn't change. And literally when you enable page caching, you serve like a static version of the web page. So if your page is very static and doesn't change that much, only just has a blog post and there's nothing that happens when you log in, or there's no difference. It's not quote unquote transactional. Page caching is going to work really, really great for you, like out of the box, and you want to cache all the things. There's videos about membership sites. So membership sites are not always static. They're very dynamic in a lot of ways. So one is if you have a checkout process for paying for access, like you're using Paid Memberships Pro, like that checkout process is dynamic. When you get to the checkout page, it looks kind of similar from person to person, but like once you submit it, you might be logged in. It's pulling your address, your credit card information, based on the settings that you chose at checkout, how much you're paying. And then definitely if on a membership site, when you're logged in, like different members of different levels have access to different content. So if you're on a page and it's restricted, how do I get my mouse? Oh. So I'm logged in right now and I go to like the directory page so I can view the profiles, but I believe this is set up. Whereas if I'm not logged in, I'm using an incognito window. I can still view the directory. Maybe it's not set up. Hold on, let me,
Some of the blogs are restricted, I think.
Yeah, maybe the courses. Okay, so here's a course. So I'm on the course here, and this is typical of a membership site. Hey, like here's some content, but you have to log in and register. But if I load this course page as logged in, I get the lessons and I can view the course. So that's an example of dynamic content. The content is different depending on which user is looking at the website. And so what can happen is if you have kind of naive page caching set up, when the member looks at this how to train your dog site, it will cache all the information. When they look at the data, this is people pay for your how to train a dog site. When this gets generated by the cache, if then someone comes to the site, I think I closed my incognito window. And then views the content, instead of getting this paywall, they're going to view the content because they're getting the cached version of the page. So like whoever visits the page first before the cache is built will kind of generate the cache. And so the cache will be built based on them. So actually not only will they see the content, it's also going to say like, welcome PM Pro Team Jason Coleman, your name, it might even bleed like private information if your cache is caching member sites. So that's something that we'll want to look into like at some point, but let's go through the cache as well. So the other thing is like our notes on Paid Memberships Pro. So the next two types of cache on this list is database caching and object caching. These things are known to cause problems with e-commerce sites and Paid Memberships Pro sites in particular. The object cache in particular, like I have notes and I was reviewing them before the call. We won't get into it, but I'm like, it might be time for us to figure out like how to better support this so you can enable an object cache. But I guess I'm talking through it. So database cache, you can imagine like when you make a database query, you say, so some stuff that's stored in the database is like one thing that's stored in the database is the relationship between users and what level they have. So and every page you look at, WordPress has to double check, Jason is logged in, what level does he have? That makes a database call. So you could cache that and like Jason has, access. The problem is if you cache that and then I lose membership, and or more common, maybe I don't have a level, so I cache the fact I don't have a level, and then I check out. If I check what level I have in the database, like it's going to get the old information instead of the new information. So this is on us as developers, but also the way that this database cache and the object cache work is kind of slightly different for every caching plugin and every server. So it's one of those things that's like easier said than done. But in general, you want to ignore the database cache and the object cache with Paid Memberships Pro. And these are things that we work on that potentially we can kind of make it easier to enable them. But it's not
Real
letting me
quick,
skip. Yeah, go ahead.
Jason, we got a couple questions from Graham.
Oh, cool.
Is
Yeah.
there, can there be too much caching?
Yeah.
Can you like over cache your site?
And this, I guess it's kind of, can there be too much cache? I guess that's like the things I'm pointing out is sometimes the cache doesn't work as you intended. Like you know, when something changes, like someone checks out, you want them to get the fresh version of everything because they're, you know, stuff changed. If your website's updating often, and actually WordPress is pretty good built in, like the content, like when you edit a post or edit a page, it tells all these systems that like the cache broke and you should update. But if you're running a lot of plugins or things are happening in clever ways, like in the modern WordPress site that's doing a lot of stuff, like not everything is just post content. There's also options and settings that are affecting what's on the page. So that stuff like won't update in real time. Yeah, in kind of a technical sense, there is like a cost to generating the cache, and like so and it takes up memory. So you could imagine like if you cache all the things, you know, the caching systems will run out of memory there. And so it's kind of like, it could potentially, and if your site is pretty fast, it could potentially actually be faster to just generate it than to find it from the cache. That's like a really obscure, and like most of the caching systems have tools in place to figure that out. So that's not really applicable for a page cache, but stuff like the object cache and the database cache, the software that facilitates that kind of keeps track of how the cache is being used, and it recognizes like, oh, the cache, it's actually, you know, I'm not actually saving them time by caching this one asset. I'm gonna, you know, cache something else. Man, I'm hand waving. It's like, because it's specific to tools, but there's like hit rates for the cache. So if you're caching at something that only Jason will ever see once, like that's obviously wasted effort because like no one else is going to load that. So you're like spending time putting something in the cache, potentially moving it, you know, into a file and stuff like that. And that can be wasted, but yeah.
And the other question was going back to dynamic and static content.
Yeah.
If you're using like the content visibility block, that would be dynamic content, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So the content visibility block or other kind of block settings that like this block only shows for these members. Or if you're using blocks like the member info block, like literally show this information about the user, all that kind of stuff. Like the directory that we're looking at, you know, that isn't blocked for non-members apparently on this site, but you know, the way this content is shown in the page is showing specific information from this user. Yeah, so if you but one thing you could do, and I think we'll get into it in the W3 Total Cache specific settings, like in the page cache, what you want to do is only cache things for logged out users. So on most membership sites, it's either like just a logged out user and I don't know who they are, they should all see the same thing basically. Or if they're logged in, I'm probably going to show their name in the upper right of the web page, so don't cache anything. So that's a setting that we'll find on the page here is like, don't cache for logged in users, and the cache then will always be generated by logged out users, and logged out users will see the same thing. And then there's some pages like the checkout page, the pricing page, the login page that are dynamic, that are interactive, and so you don't want to cache those pages. But there can be issues sometimes when you cache them. Anyway, I was gonna say, so the database cache, you don't want to turn this on. It can cause issues, and the gains aren't as big as the page cache. So this is like advanced tutorial is like someone says, hey, I actually want to use the database cache. You have to have a super large site to qualify it. And then it's like, all right, let's set this up specifically for your site and handle all the edge cases that are going to come up and like be a problem with the database cache. But let me test and see what it says. And then use the none. And then same thing for an object cache. Say none and click next. So the browser cache though is a cache that you typically want to use. It's smart enough to handle like the logged in versus logged out use case. And so let's see what it says when it tests the browser cache. So it's kind of not giving me the same kind of stats, but you do want to enable the browser cache. And yeah, basically it's kind of like when the browser gets a file, if it gets that same file, it's going to load it from the browser first. And files are things that like the web server is really smart. Like in the quote unquote header of every file, there's like a little line that says this is when it was generated. And if it was generated like more recently than the cached version, it'll load it again. That's less so the case with like these dynamically generated pages and things like that. I'm not sure what the image optimization that W3 Total Cache does, but it might be worth looking. Like WebP is like a smaller file size, so I didn't know that W3 Total Cache has that, but that's a big performance boost if your images are like a megabyte large and you didn't do anything to kind of lower the file size. There's a bunch of tools in WordPress that will automatically give you smaller images. I'm going to skip for now, but apparently W3 Total Cache has one of those too. Lazy loading of images. This is like an advanced technique too for handling caching situations that's kind of built into WordPress and browsers now. But if you've ever noticed when you load a page and then you kind of scroll down, like and there's a lot of images on the site and the image kind of has to like load in place, like it's not loaded by the time you scroll down. That's lazy loading. So if an image is what they call below the fold, you'd have to scroll down to see it. You can set that up so that the browser doesn't even load it until it comes up on screen. But then when it shows up on screen, it's going to take like a second to load the image. But depending on the nature of your website, this can save a lot of load on the website. I'm going to skip this for now. I think it's important for certain kinds of sites. There's other tools that do this too. That's cool. That I know there's been updates to WordPress core to enable this, so it seems like W3 Total Cache works into this. And let's see more caching options. This has some other information. So let me go to the dashboard. So I went through the total cache setup and I set up page caching and I skipped the database and the object caching because those can cause issues on transactional websites like membership websites. I set up the browser cache. So the page cache and the browser cache will have a huge performance boost on your website. And not only on like the static portions of your website, but also the dynamic portions of your website. It's important to note that because typically most of the traffic to your website is logged out viewers, it's a lot of bots. Like, I don't know if you get like people analyze their web logs now. Like there's Googlebot, of course, and Bing, the search engines crawl your website. But then every AI tool has their crawler now hitting your website at 4 a.m. and loading it. And they don't log in, right? So they view the logged out version. So if you can speed up the logged out cached experience of your website, that takes load off your server. And so if you were spending 80% of your server CPU and processing power to generate pages for bots, and then that's now shut down to like 10% because it's cached, that 70% can now be used to serve pages to real users. Anyway, so we have that set up, but there's a few things we want to do for our membership site. And let me go into it's in the page cache. So let me go into the page cache settings. Which page have I landed on here? I'm on the dashboard. It's reminding me about the Nginx rules. And I think it's funny, like if you're on a web host, resetting your Nginx server isn't necessarily like an easy thing to do. On your own host, you can. It's not that hard a thing to do. I'm going to hide that unless it keeps coming back. And then I want to go to the page cache settings. So I guess settings can be modified visiting into general settings. I always found the W3 total cache settings like a little confusing to navigate because there's so much going on. But here, okay, so the basic settings for the page cache we already did, like, is it on or off? How do we want to do it? What's interesting, like on this screen, they're actually, graying out the options that it's not detecting. So it actually knows that my local web server might have a version of Memcache or Redis or opcode caching working. You could talk to your host and play around with that on your server. If you have one of these other versions available, it will be faster. It's the equivalent of if you have built your own computer and you have like hard disk drives that are disk based and they spin, and then you have a hard disk drive that's memory based, like a solid state drive, and the solid state drive is much faster. That's kind of the difference between like the opcode, Memcache, Redis, and the disk is like it's going to load the cache from memory, which is much faster than loading it from disk. So if you're able to do that, you want to do it, but you get very far just by using the disk, and that's kind of advanced and based on your host. But let's go into the advanced settings here, and we'll go through these one by one. So caching the post page, this is good by default. This is less common nowadays. Most homepages are sales pages, but like the homepage used to be like the epicenter of everything going on your website. And it's kind of like, most recent comments, a favorite just came in. So if your homepage is very dynamic, you might not want to cache your homepage. I think more often nowadays you do want to. So that says don't. So you want to leave it unchecked. You want that cached. Caching feeds can help. I'm almost surprised that's like set off by default. Like the bots that I was talking about crawl your feeds, and sometimes your feed, like the RSS feed, your sitemaps, they get crawled by the bots, and it puts a lot of load on your server to kind of generate that. So I feel like I would check this. It's interesting that's off by default. And I think W3 Total Cache is pretty good about their defaults are kind of set up in a minimal way to cause the least number of issues. This is HTTPS is like secure. If you're not an HTTPS, you got to find our other tutorial on how to make your full site HTTPS. So of course it's kind of like cache your HTTPS requests. This won't even let us do it, but so I won't talk about caching your 404 pages. That might be a good idea if you have a lot of those. You check through like the Google Webmaster Tools to figure out why you're getting 404s and how to fix them. If you have kind of unique 404 pages that are specific to like what was searched or what file was trying to be loaded, you maybe don't want to do that. But if you have one specific 404, that will just give you a boost. And then there's an option here like don't cache pages for the following users, which I skipped this because I just don't cache pages for all logged in users. So I'm looking for here, don't cache pages for logged in users. So that these are redundant. But this is most important. So your members on your website will be logged in as a WordPress user, and they'll have a membership level. So you don't want to cache their activity because their member information will get stuck in the cache, and you don't want to show them cached information because they purchased access to your website and they want to see like what they have access to. It's advanced. Maybe we'll get to hand wave you over it. Like I said, like for specific sites, there are ways to there are techniques to cache content even for logged in users. But for most websites, it's like I said, it's like you serve the cache stuff to the logged out users, and your members, you don't cache so they can see it. I know Graham was asking about the price of W3 Total Cache, and it is free. So W3 Total Cache, the plugin, is free from the .org repository. And their business makes money by, I believe, selling services to kind of help you set this up. They also sell or resell like CDN, like third-party tools to make your website even faster. Cool. So I think that was the most important thing.
Also pay for support because the support on your left-hand column is read out. So
yep, yeah. So. Yep, I'm not sure their plans, they can help you through it. And they probably have some other good services. was I gonna say? Okay, cache alias host names. This might be important for like multi-site, or like if you, it's kind of advanced. Sometimes you can set up your website to serve different things from subdomains. That's not typically the case, but if it is, that's probably a pretty fairly safe thing to do. The cache period here, I like the defaults. I think are pretty good. There's an option here like prime the page cache. So what this means is, like I said, the first person to hit a page when there's no cache will generate the cache. So in the worst case example, if your website's crazy slow and it takes 10 seconds to load a page, you know, the first sorry person to land on that page is going to wait 10 seconds for it to load. And then after that, everyone else is going to view the page from the cache in like a second or faster. So on highly trafficked sites, people are visiting things often enough to make sure there's almost always something in the cache. If you're on a website that has relatively low, say like it's a very niche business, you're targeting like a handful of people and there's like 10 or 20 people on your website per day, you might want to prime the cache. So what this does is in the background, it'll load the pages to force the caches to be generated. The problem with that is it's like, it does have a downside. It's like another bot running on your website, loading things that may or may not get used. So it's kind of like on a decently trafficked website, the normal activity of a website will make sure that the things that need to be cached get cached. If there's some page that people only hit once every few days, it kind of doesn't have to be in the cache. They'll wait when they load it. If there's a page that's being hit over repeatedly, like it's going to get into the cache and people will load it. So maybe it's kind of safe to do this, but it's almost like you don't want to run like another background script if you don't have to. But so there's some settings here, like if you want to prime the cache. I typically don't do that, but I guess I'm running kind of like higher traffic sites. The purge policy is kind of like you could have like specific rules for like breaking the cache automatically. REST API requests. So REST API is kind of like ways to load content from your WordPress database that's not a fully generated page. This is similar to the database cache and the object cache. It has potential to break things, and so typically you want to leave it off. But you could, in certain cases, I guess there could be a reason like the front end of your website really relies on a REST API feature, and you need it to be cached. But I would avoid that one. It's funny, these settings I'm looking for are really far down the page. So maybe I skip over a lot of these things. And then here are the two that I look at: the never cache the following pages. We like to add stuff here. So if you look at the, I think we have.
That's towards the bottom.
Yeah, here's a gist. So it's in general. So you want to exclude the paid memberships pro generated pages and the login page, the password reset page, and the checkout and confirmation pages. So these pages are either transactional, like the login page and the checkout page are forms. And so sometimes the default loading of your checkout page is like it's the same for everyone, but that's like a form that gets submitted. And actually the total cache has ways to kind of ignore form posts and things like that. But in general, it's like it's kind of just a good idea. Like you can maybe, if you have a high traffic site and your checkout, congratulations, your checkout page is getting hit by hundreds of people per minute. Like there are ways to cache your checkout page, but it's kind of general purpose. Like, hey, make sure this one gets generated. So you can copy and paste these 4 lines here into this box to never cache. So we currently prefix like all the PM Pro generated pages start with membership-account, right? Or membership-checkout, membership-levels. Or like sometimes you might change this to like your pricing page. Actually, I wonder if we do that. I don't know what we do on here. Our demo is our pricing page is membership levels. So this is an important one too. Like, so anything where like these words show up in the URL are going to get ignored. And then there's other flavors of this. So like they might become useful as kind of like, is there a category that's kind of causing issues that's cached? Certain authors, I don't know. But I edit that and then we'll save those settings. It took me like a half hour to go through that, but basically it's like go another version of this video would be like really quick blaze through the wizard, set up page cache, set up the browser cache, and then find the page cache settings, make sure that you're not caching for logged in users, and then make sure you add these lines to the list of things that don't get cached. And now my little dev site here is set up for caching. I'm logged in, so like this actually isn't cached anyway. But if I, log out and visit this page, I wonder if, when I can get, if what I did was I clicked right clicked and went to inspect, and it loaded the Chrome debug bar. Most browsers have some version of this, debug bar. Chrome definitely does. And then there's a network tab. And then if I refresh the page on the network tab, I can kind of see what happens when if I click all here. It's like everything that gets loaded and how long it takes to load it. And the first one here is like in 364 milliseconds, this page gets loaded. So again, I'm on a local server. That's crazy fast to begin with. Like anything under a second is great. Anything under half a second is amazing. Let me see how long that same page, the levels page takes for the admin user. I'm logged in. So it's loading a little bit of stuff for the admin, but mostly it just isn't hitting the cache. So let's see what this looks like when I refresh this page. So it took 477 milliseconds to load this page. The other thing is the browser cache is working. So there's like and there's tools to kind of simulate this as well. If I check this box to disable the cache, I think that will like ignore the browser cache. And so it should slow down even more slightly. And again, all these effects would be much larger on a live website. But we can still, yeah. So this is our site here, loading via cache. It's funny. It almost makes, I should have set up like I could still do this. We can kind of set up my dev site here with some cache. Or even like let me load the staging site. Hopefully our team's not doing content on staging. We'll do it live. So this is a real server. It's a decently beefy server, but it's not as strong as like the server our actual Pay Merchants Pro site is on. And then I think it does have caching set up. So let me go to the settings and see. But it's okay. So the page cache, let's enable it. My server had opcode enabled, but it's not showing up now. So maybe it's not anymore, but let's just use the disk cache. And actually, I should enable the browser caching. We didn't get into it, but minifying your code is another like cache adjacent thing that's like a different topic. Yeah, the browser cache is enabled. Okay, so now I have the page cache. Actually, what's funny? I'm glad this actually happened because my this forced me to show you something. One, like I have notification clutter on this site. Congratulations, right? Okay, I need to upgrade. I need to do a bunch of stuff. But I get this error, and this is pretty common using W3 Total Cache. So part of how W3 Total Cache works is it edits the htaccess file. And I think on my dev site, the WordPress and the web server had access to edit that automatically, like it was configured to do that. On my live site here, we have kind of some security stuff in place. It's a decent security thing to like change the permissions on your htaccess files. So like random WordPress plugins aren't updated. It's a pretty important file that has configuration for your website. So actually this might happen and you have to make some of these changes by hand. So I can click like view the required changes and it's going to give me some lines to put into my htaccess file. And now I might do that off screen.
You're on screen right now.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna do that.
There you go.
Let me do that off screen. I'm getting there. So where does it says edit the file, replace all the lines between begin W3 total cache page cache core and end W3 total cache page cache core. So let me find those things. Okay, cool. That's actually not in there, so I'll just add it to the bottom. Or maybe I need to put it above the WordPress stuff. And actually, I had a permission error again, so I need to do this a slightly different way. This is fun. Like a video, me doing stuff off screen. Are there other questions coming in here?
There are not. It has been a quiet little group today.
Yeah, I hope everyone's having fun going to the pool, staying cool. Or maybe folks in the Southern Hemisphere are staying warm.
I was actually surprised at how cool it is today. It started out gloomy, but when I took my dog for a walk earlier, it was only like 78, which is highly unusual for Florida in July.
Yeah, that's great. That's nice.
Muggy.
It's not bad as it.
78. Yeah.
Bad. Okay, so I made that change. Let me refresh here and see if it is still complaining. It should kind of detect that change was made. Yeah, so now that change was made. So anyway, I did that off screen. I'm using the staging site, and I don't want to leak other information that might be in my htaccess file. But I basically copied that code above the WordPress section of my htaccess file. And but I can kind of let me load in a different view, like what that looks like. So let me. I'll load the Must Love Dog site and come back. And here, so yeah, here's this. Here's the Nginx version of this. So htaccess is like an Apache configuration file. Nginx uses a file called nginx.config. And actually, I hadn't even reset my Nginx config. We might have even a bigger boost in performance if I do that thing it was reminding me. Maybe I'll try that. But you'll see this is really confusing, but this is what W3 Total Cache does, is it takes your settings and converts it into like the configuration code that the web server needs to know, like, hey, these are static files. Like, hey, if you're doing a JPEG, here's a good time to expire. If you're, here's the page cache settings. If it looks like something like this, like these are probably things you don't want to cache, and that, based on our settings, we said ignore certain posts. So I bet if I searched, I might find those posts. Maybe no, maybe that's happening in code.
You didn't add those pages to your or to not be cached on your staging site. You only added them on your Must Love Dog site.
I'm assuming I already had it configured, but let me check. Page cache advanced settings. Thanks for the heads up. So we want to don't cache for logged in users, check. And then here, yeah, never cache the following pages. So we got, and we also have forums. That's like another thing. Like in general, the /forums page on our site is restricted to members only. So if you hit it as a non-user, you get redirected to the checkout or login screen. That redirect gets cached by some of this other stuff going on. So the /forums page itself is like, it doesn't have to be cached. You're only viewing it when you're logged in. We put WP admin in there for some reason. I think that might be handled in some other section, maybe just like older setup. And maybe something about our Black Friday sale. We had something on there we didn't want to be cached. Cool. But yeah, and this is confusing, but this is like the htaccess part, but you would paste this into the file. What I wanted to do was kind of then like do a comparison of like loading like a page here on the staging site. Logged out and logged in. You guys know, getting some secrets.
Look at those bright colors.
Yeah, I think like we do some clever things on our pricing page so people see different. Yeah, we do this. Like this is a trick on we tweak some of the colors on the staging site to be like obnoxious. So we're less likely. So we know we're on the staging site and we're less likely to do things like I do, which is like accidentally update the live site when I'm supposed to be working on the staging site.
Yeah, we do our best not to pull a Jason.
Yeah, the blog page is a good one. Actually, there's like, I know there's style issues on our blog page, so we got to ignore that. This is a staging site. We're kind of constantly breaking it and testing things. But if I go here and refresh, it does take a while to load because it's, loading a bunch of files. Now I'm logged out. So like, wow, wait, it took 55 milliseconds to load that. But that's actually the first paint, and then the full time, hold on, where's the one? It finished in 1.86 seconds. So it took 1.86 seconds. It got the content from the web server in 51 seconds. It also is like loading images and stuff. When it was done, it runs JavaScript, Google Analytics, triggers, all this stuff. At the end, it took 1.86 seconds. So let me then view this as a user where it's going to have to, it's like if you don't have this network tab open, when you refresh, it doesn't actually show what happens. So you have to have it open first. Let's refresh now and see how long this takes. So it took 3.39 seconds. And 3 seconds of that was like from the server time. This first thing is like it waits 3 seconds for the server to figure out how to build the blog page with all the random stuff going on, all the broken images that we have on the staging site. It took 3 seconds to load that. And the page caching, that part only took 51 seconds, and it loaded the whole thing, about half the time that it took on the logged out. 22 seconds later, it's saying now. What took so long? And this is, I don't know, you can like go into like page speed stuff and see like what took, if we sort here. Can I sort by time? Yeah. Some of these images, I think some of these images are failing, like they got deleted on our staging site. So that's kind of weird. Our limit post use JavaScript has some kind of issue we got to look into. That's taken, so you can see like if you sort this, like these are the things that are taking the longest time. If you have a giant 5 megabyte image, these images I think are all 404s. So caching the 404s on this site might like, speed up improvements too. By the way, if you do this report, you can kind of see what the culprits are and sometimes fix it. You can either like, hey, which plugin do I have to blame? Or these images are either missing or too big. I can answer some comments. I can also run like I can show like a nerdy Siege load testing thing. And that's like a way to test how the page caching is working and stuff.
Yeah, there's just a comment from Graham. Caching is not something I've set up yet, as I was going to protect my uploads folder that told me to turn off caching. I may not use the plugin to secure my uploads folder and use caching.
Okay, yeah, so you must protect your uploads folder. I think maybe Graham is referring to, we have some blog posts around
protecting file content.
Yeah, there's protecting file content, either like the files that are associated with blog posts or folders in the different files. Yeah, he said his uploads folder. So that how does that interact with the caching? So what's happening there? So typically, and there's the page caching we were talking about, and then what's important for some hosts, I know WP Engine in particular does this, which is nice. They automatically set up a content delivery network for your like images and PDF files, because it says like, and a lot of web servers do something clever with the files. They're like, oh, that's a PDF. Like, you don't have to load your web server to serve a PDF. I'll just kind of send the file over and I'll remember where it is. And that's that example I said where like Jason's in Pennsylvania, let's serve him the file from New York instead of grabbing the file from a European server, stuff like that. So the host, so that's like another kind of cache that like, so you want to disable like the CDN and you want to exclude certain types of files from that kind of caching. Because what you really, if you're locking those files down for members, the way that works is when you hit a file, it, it will, instead of just serving the file, it will load WordPress, figure out what membership they have, and then use some PHP script to see if they're supposed to, are they allowed to have this file? And then it kind of uses the web server and PHP to serve the file. So that's a long way to go around like, hey, that's why you would want to like disable caching. But I think what you would do is something like this. You don't want to disable caching entirely. What you want to do is something like, well, this is the page cache, but the page cache isn't involved in caching those files. That's involved in, I don't think like there's not like, so that's what like, that's like a CDN setting or like a host at the host level caching.
Could it be an object?
Yeah. The object caching. Yeah, it's kind of a different
I know
thing.
nothing about caching.
Like,
Don't listen to me.
yeah. It sounds, you're like a file. It sounds like an object, right? In reality, like an object is like it's what is an object? It's like a programming thing. It's like at the programming time. It's kind of like when we in PHP we build these objects, and like when we get them, it's kind of like, hey, it looks just like the level. It looks just like the user from before. And actually now that I'm looking at this object, we have a to-do. Sorry, I'm here. It seems like there might be some ways to like exclude certain things from the object cache. So you can turn it on for everything else and just exclude it for the stuff that breaks. I don't think the browser cache has like a, to ignore certain things. No. So actually it's funny, like the page cache, it turns your website into a file so it can serve the file more quickly. Files are just files. They get served really quickly. So they're usually outside of the context of like this page caching. And that's almost like that's like a hosting question. That's, if we look at the diagram, that's, in this global cache, we'll have stuff like Redis, Memcache, Varnish, which like sits at the hosting level and serves files, or CDN. And so that's like a hosting question, and they should, like, WP Engine can do this. We have like on our website, I think I forget the URL. Let's see if this gets clever. In the documentation, we have this for some hosts. It's like, hey, for page caching, like WP Engine has their own interface for their cache, and you can add exceptions for certain URLs to that cache.
For WP Engine specifically, you have to reach out to their support. They don't have settings.
Yeah, there's for the files. Yeah, they're okay. That's right. Yeah, there's a magic word. Them. I think that's in our blog post, right? So it's like lockdown files. I think our blog post might have like, here's the magic words to ask your host. Stuff like that.
I think the draft of the email was on the caching page or the WP Engine page you were on.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Sorry. Oh, this is good TV too. Like, watch Jason browse his own website.
As Sam is the website database.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hello. I'm using papers. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think this is like the stuff we talked about before. But it doesn't have like the files. But you would add. So what you would add here is that /WP content /uploads, like wherever the files are. Actually, I should double check. This just came up recently. There is like some kind of magic word specifically when you're protecting files with WP Engine. There's these rules. So you would write these rules, but in WP Engine has their own way to control these. And so you kind of have to let your support team do this. It's like, hey, if I'm loading a PDF, a doc, or a zip file, I want that to go through the web server instead of the CDN or the varnish or the cache. So I apologize that that's not like super specifically clear. Hey, and if you're a paying member, like work it out with us. Like it's kind of like ask your host. The idea is like they should exclude the location of those files, and they should be able to do it by file type. So that this is kind of key depending on like what you're protecting. A lot of times, like your thumbnail and your featured image and like the book cover for your course, like that stuff, images, there's a lot of them on your website, and you maybe don't want to slow the loading of them down. So don't force those to check for membership. But the stuff that you're actually selling is probably in a PDF, a doc, or a PowerPoint, or a zip file, or something like that. So you can, or like it could, like the files could have a certain naming convention. The ones that get protected always have the same kind of name. So you can kind of like tweak this command. This is gobbledygook, but I think if you have good hosts, you say, hey, I want these files to be excluded from cache and they should be served through WordPress, and they should know how to do that. If they don't, kind of like open a support ticket with us and say, I'm using host X. I tried what you said. They told me this. And then like what we'll try to do is figure out what we call like the magic words to get the support to figure out like how to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you manage your own web server, we can help you figure out like, hey, I'm a little bit confused by this. Like, how do I add like a different file? I sell MP3s. How do I add MP3s to the list? It's like, oh, okay, here, like we'll help you do that, stuff like that.
We do have another question, and then we are at the hour to wrap up.
Yeah.
So Cheryl from Reportica wants to know, can you tell us when we should know when to get an expert to tweak caching? Very high or spiky traffic they know about, but are there any other situations?
Yeah.
And I guess to add to that, do we
Yeah.
have a caching expert that we would recommend?
Yeah. Okay. I think most of the folks on our / developers page, you have to create, we have a form now. Oh wait, this is the application. Hold on, never mind.
You have to type in developers with an S.
With an S, sorry. Yeah, what is, okay. Cool, yeah. Most of the folks on this list, Square Lanes, Express Tech, Mirko, iCubes, the Moon Ninjas, they all know fairly well how to optimize websites. I don't think there's anyone in particular. I would skip over the kind of like, these are like gig sites, Fiverr and Codable, and get like a quote from one of these. It would be nice. It used to be something we would do on the Do It For Me plan that we had. And I'm actually thinking about like trying to build like a test and like force these folks to like go through the test. And it's like, oh, okay, you can generally optimize a WordPress website. But there is like like I said, I mean, I'm hand waving over like, you got to talk to your host. I don't understand. They might use Memcache or Redis or something like, so there's all these like weird, subtle things that are specific to each host and website. And so that's why you kind of want like a more seasoned expert to help you with it. But that said, like, I think sometimes people optimize way too much. Like, and actually, like if you're into like if you right click and go to inspect, there's like this lighthouse test you can do, and Google will give you a score, and it'll be like, ooh, you get like a B, and you're like, I want an A, I don't want a B. And that tool is really cool, the Lighthouse tool, and there's ones like it that kind of do tests on your website and give you ideas to improve the performance. But in reality, like as a person who's been building websites for over 25 years, like a lot of the recommendations are like so minuscule, and like they go back and forth. So it's like combine all your JavaScript into one file. No, it's actually faster if you separate your JavaScript into a lot of files. And you're like, well, wait, which one is right? And it's like the answer is it depends. And actually the answer is it probably doesn't matter on most websites. Like the difference between like a 1/10 of a second. So another thing is like, I guess I'm digging into the weeds here, but maybe hopefully talking through some of the weird optimization things about like which ones to worry about, which ones not to worry about. So for example, this is my live website. You maybe noticed like our demo website did like 90 database queries. Our live website does 214 queries. And I think some pages do like almost 1,000 queries. Definitely on the back end, it's doing like a lot of database queries. And we'll sometimes have folks telling us that like, hey, this, actually here, I'll probably find something. Here's duplicate queries. look at this. Our Paid Memberships Pro plugin, I'm sure we know about this, makes the same database query to load categories. We technically only had to do this once. We could have cached it in our plugin so we didn't have to hit the database, but it literally takes, it's even hard to read. This is 5/10,000ths of a second. It's cool. So even if we loaded this 100 times, it wouldn't even like really affect like the perceptible difference of how the page. So we take that into account. So sometimes it's like, there's a lot of stuff that our developers could use, like figuring out why we're calling this twice and optimizing it is like low on the list because it's going to save us like I think that's 10,000ths of a second,
Nothing.
right? This one, we should maybe look into this one. We're calling it 3 times and it takes 1,000th of a second. So, and sometimes like, actually, like, I don't know what this is. It could be custom code and stuff like that, or 2 add-ons doing the same thing. It's actually really subtle. So that's not worth it. Like you want to, sometimes people like want to over optimize things. Also, people want to optimize kind of like too soon. Like if you're like, you know, I don't know, I only have 1,000 users now, but when I have 100,000 users, I'm going to want to, you know, I'm going to want it to run really fast for 100,000 users. And it's like, congratulations, especially if a large majority of them are paying members, like you're going to have enough money to hire, like every website that has 100,000 users, like I believe probably has someone on call at least part-time to like help with this stuff. And so all the problems that you have are like the same problems every website has, and they're very unique to the site. And it's best to have an expert to do it. But actually that user count is one of them. So I think you said like, when should we look into it? I think there's primarily 2 things. Like one is you use this inspect a network tool to like, the tests will, there's a lot of things I went into. There's like first paint, it loads JavaScript. It like that one page took 20 seconds to load, but actually while I was talking, like the page was already loaded. So there's a difference between like the number that comes up when you click refresh from literally this built-in tool, which I like, and then other tools can make it sound really scary. But even if this took 3 seconds to load, like the first paint happens like relatively quickly. Like the actual experience of using the website, like don't take that for granted. Like sometimes it sounds like the page runs slow, but actually when you're browsing the website, you don't even notice that much. So you feel like your website's slowing down. It's kind of like reach out to someone, show them some of the slower parts of your website and see if there's things they can do to increase the speed. The other thing I was going to say was user count. So especially on the back end, there's a lot that slows down when your number of users goes up. And that's a good reminder for us to like find and collect all the stuff we've written about that. Inside our plugin, we've made some optimizations for high user websites. I feel like we had a blog post, or maybe it's in draft, that we should publish. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's
What's
like
it about?
Yeah, it's like performance for high traffic websites. So
Yeah,
maybe
try
like
speed.
I think, what's that? Speed.
Search for speed.
Scaling high traffic websites.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. All right, this is a good one to scale. Scaling WordPress. I think it probably writes a lot of the stuff I'm talking about. It's like, hey, focus on the actual experience. Talk to your host. Has some things. Okay. And I think there's actually, so this is good. I think there's some other things that optimizing. Yeah, this is good. There's some things we do for like sites with high numbers of users. Like we do it in the code, but there's other things you can do. Like when you search, you go to orders and you search for an email. If you have 100,000 sites, that query is like, you don't really know this, but that query is like, well, maybe the email is used in their description or their bio or their address, or like, it's kind of dumb, like, or an order use that email, but not, we actually have flags in the code now that's like, since like 3.0, I think, hey, like if you have over 10,000 users, like don't do the big query that's going to take 5 seconds. Do a smaller query that's not as comprehensive. So there's little tweaks we already do in the plugin, but on high traffic sites, there's things like that you can do. So that's it. The other thing I'd say is like I talk about users as if a user is a user, but there's different use cases for sites. So I think the most typical that we talked about is like I have a high number of logged out users and a small number of logged in users. So that's normally the case. And then the other thing that's normally the case is like your usage is spread out over time. So like paid memberships pro, I don't know what it is, gets like 2,000 visits a day and it's fairly consistent. Maybe we get like posted or we send an email or we're running a sale or we get like a link from a blog post and there's a blip. But for the most part, it's spread out over time. This is not the case for every website. If you run a website where like it's your membership is closed session, like, hey, by July 1st, everyone has to be signed up and then we're going to start. Or I always use the example, we had a customer once who would do live presentations for students. So they'd be like a classroom of 30 people and they would say, go buy my thing on my website. And all 30 people at the same time would hit refresh. And so there's a difference between like 30 people coming to your website over the course of even like 10 minutes and 30 people coming to your website, literally at the same exact time. And maybe I'll find it like that Siege tool. There's tools, it's called like load balancing or load testing or benchmark tools. There's some online ones. They can simulate what's it like when 10 people are on your website at the same time, 100 people on your website at the same time, 1,000 people on, and they're kind of sensitive tools because it's literally the same tools that people use to what's called DDoS, denial of service, your website. So you can flood traffic to your own website and shut it down. So it's a little scary. But if you use the tool correctly, this like future video, you can get some feedback on like, sure, my website works fine when one person is navigating, but it breaks when like 20 people are there at the same time. And I'm about to go on a TV show and promote my site. So I need to make sure it's fast. So super long-winded answer for like when to look out. A lot of users, you're going to have a lot of people on your site at the same time. Actually use your site and trust the speed. There you go.
Awesome. So our next open office hours, we're kind of hitting like two different audiences between this open office hours and the next one, because this one's like kind of advanced. You already have your membership site going, trying to speed it up. Our next, I don't have it up on the live site yet. That's what I do after.
Oh, it's not there yet.
But no, it's not there yet. But we're going to be with Kim Coleman on July 25th, and it's going to be what can you do before monetization? So, your minimum viable product. Things just getting people in the door for free, and then, then you can start with actually making money.
Yeah.
Because that's our goal. We want you to get paid, but everybody needs a place to start. So it's going to kind of be a cool open office hours on how to get started and what you can do before you start making money.
I like it.
So that will be July 25th.
Build your audience, get your content ready.
Yes.
Get ready. You can even like sell your membership site before it's there. People do that, I'm sure Kim will get into it on the next one. It's kind of like people, if you really like blow your mind like this, like sometimes I didn't even know it was possible. And it's like, take their money and then give it back to them if you decide like not enough people signed up or stuff like that. Awesome.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Right. And we'll see everybody next time.
All right. See ya.